Ladies and gentlemen, you are not going to believe who is who is going to replace Tim Walz. Now, I was doing a lot of research on Tim Walz and all these whistleblowers and what's been happening with Ilhan Omar, President Trump. But the biggest news just came out as we are not too far away from November 3rd of 2026. That's when the governor's election happens in Minnesota. Now, again, let me just show you this for more context as to how deep this actually should go and will go, as I'm about to show you exactly who's running against them. So let me actually show you guys this, right? Does Minnesota have term limits? No, Minnesota does not have term limits for its governor. The governor is elected to a 4-year term, and there is no limit for the number of terms this person can serve. Now, this is one out of I'm not sure about over 10 states that don't require term limits as far as governors go. And so this is a huge deal because this guy had all this fraud happen on his state under his watch for that amount of time. And you're telling me that he didn't know? And where is he? Where is he? After he made an appearance, he's just gone. So new whistleblowers inside the Minnesota Department of Human Services say the fraud has likely exceeded $6.5 billion since Tim Walz became governor. $6.5 billion? That is an insane amount of money. And this fraud goes back to the taxpayers. So despite repeated warnings about the rampant fraud overtaking our state, Walz has done virtually nothing to stop it. And again, you had the Department of Human Services employees. They came out against him. And guess who's coming out against him, ladies and gentlemen? Breaking news, huge news. Mike Lindell has reportedly filed to run for governor of Minnesota against Tim Walz. The Mike Lindell for governor committee was registered with the Minnesota's Campaign Finance Board on Wednesday. So the huge announcement has been made. And again, say what you want about Mike Lindell, but he is a very close ally to Trump. And if Trump goes behind him and literally campaigns from now all the way up to then, this can be a huge, huge deal. What do you guys think about this? Mike Lindell versus Governor Tim Walz. So now I have a special guest, ladies and gentlemen, who actually knows Mike Lindell's worked on Lindell TV before. And here is the great George AA. You can find them on George AA on YouTube. We got big news.
Crazy. Bro. You're reminding me that I worked with Mike Lindell. I actually did work for his platform. I had a whole special show and everything, but this is big news.
What do you think? So here, all right, before I ask you, what do you even think? I was talking about exactly, the fraud that has been happening, obviously over, I think 6.5 billion is the number that, again, the whistleblowers are pointing to as far as the Department of Human Services employees. They came out, they were basically just putting it all out there as far as what Tim Walz has done since, and all the money that has been committed in fraud since he's been governor. And now you have Mike Lindell. Does this move the needle?
Well, here's the thing, Lou. Mike Lindell is a beloved Minnesota native. Yeah, he's controversial nationally, and the mainstream media has all these things to say about him. But Lindell hires a lot of people. He employs thousands of people with MyPillow, and he is known as a guy with a heroic American story, right? From Minnesota originally, and became a multi-millionaire after going through a very tough time. So Mike Lindell might seem to some people like, oh, like this isn't serious. It's absolutely serious. Plus, he's going to have the backing of Donald Jamal Trump, okay? The real G in the White House. He's going to have his backing because they're very close friends. And they have dinner very often. Anytime I talk to anyone that works with Mike Lindell or Mike Lindell himself, it's like he's at Mar-a-Lago or he's at Bedminster, New Jersey, or he's at the White House meeting with Trump. And it's like they're constantly meeting with each other.
How epic of a campaign is that going to be, right? So that's what I'm trying to paint for the audience. If you have, of course, we just saw what happened in this last election when Trump put his foot down right in Tennessee, and you had Matt Van Epps win by almost more than 10 points when it was not looking that way. So Mike Lindell, and Trump, that would be one heck of a campaign. Now, let me actually go here real quick. I want to go to Steve Hilton. Steve Hilton from California, who, again, could be governor, future, is looking very bright for him in the early polls. I told you guys about Stephen Hilton before, but I want to show you this video because it kind of does go into the conversation I want to have about Ilhan Omar and, of course, in Minnesota, Tim Walz. So an Afghan immigrant in California asked to be paid in cash to avoid losing $84,000 a year in welfare. You can be sure that Tim Walz fraud scandal is much worse in Gavin Newsom's California. So you have this movement and the Tim Walz wake-up call, and now Steve Hilton is somebody that is talking about how this just goes from state to state. I want to play this video real quick because I think people don't understand how much of a big deal it would be to have people actually stand up and campaign against this and against all this fraud. Take a listen.
A few weeks ago, a business owner here in California told me that one of his new employees asked to be paid in cash, not on payroll. Why? The business owner asked. Well, because the employee from Afghanistan was worried that he would lose his welfare payments. How much is that? $7,000 a month. That is $84,000 a year here in California. So when we look at this massive scandal in Minnesota, $1 billion from the social services system in fraud and corruption, you can be sure it is much, much worse right here in California. We already know that over $20 billion in the pandemic from the EDD scandal was sent in welfare payments to people in jail, on death row, people who are dead. We know that over $24 billion was completely lost on homelessness spending. All that money spent, and we still have situations like this all over California, everywhere you look. That's why today I am calling for a complete and total audit of every part of California's bloated welfare state, so we find the corruption and the fraud and the waste in Gavin Newsom's California and end it.
So the reason why I bring this up is because I see a pattern now, and I see a victory in 2026 because you have Mike Lindell, who is going to run against Tim Walz. And what is his campaign going to be all about? Fraud. Steve Hilton in California. What is his campaign going to be all about? Fraud. So this is a huge deal because it gives a way of exposure. And I think this is a lifeline to a degree to a Republican Party that was not looking too good for this coming elections. Because when we always talk about what happens in these midterms and what happens in these local elections, people don't really get up to vote unless it's Trump. And Trump has said it himself.
Or when there's a big topic that overwhelms the voters' minds. In Virginia, Glenn Youngkin campaigned on parents' rights. That's a issue everyone can get behind. We want parents to make choices over their kids. But Lou, he won staggeringly with great margins against a guy who was very popular on the Democrat side in a blue state. Glenn Youngkin did that. So if Mike Lindell is going to run with, and same thing with Steve Hilton, if they're going to run with fraud, look at what Tim Walz is doing, look at what Gavin Newsom is doing. They're going to be getting a lot of voters who are not typically red voters, just people in the middle that are going to be like, you know what, that is actually messed up that these people come over here and they do all these fraud schemes and our governor's allowing it to happen. So I think we're going to be seeing an intense primary cycle and also a much more intense general election cycle.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so I want to get to this real quick because I, honestly speaking, I want to get to, in closing, what has happened between not only all this fraud, but the response to all this fraud. And I want to go to Ilhan Omar's response to all this fraud when she was questioned on CNN and how similar her response was to Tim Walz, which is kind of crazy and ironic that their responses would be the same thing because they're blaming the COVID programs and how the system was just so, like, I don't know how to explain it. I want to find the right words for this because He did
system
it.
wasn't secure, so
No,
the Somalians
it became attractive. Like it
yeah,
became.
yeah. It gave them an incentive to steal. Yeah, like that's not normal. People don't think, you know what, I'm going to defraud the federal government out of $1 billion.
Yeah, let's actually go. Let's actually play this one first. Let's actually go to Ilhan Omar's first.
First of all, federal prosecutors say 59 people have been investigating these schemes so far. Americans at large stole tens of billions of forms of aid during the pandemic all over the country. Minnesota's fraud scandal stands out, according to federal auditors. What are you hearing from investigators right now?
Well, I've been following the cases closely as they've gone through the courts, and we know that there are more indictments possibly coming. I think that number might go up to 73 is what I'm hearing.
Okay. Can you shed any light on why the fraud got so out of control in Minnesota?
I think what happened is that, you know, when you have these kind of new programs that are designed to help people, you're oftentimes relying on third parties to be able to facilitate. And I just think that a lot of the COVID programs that were set up, they were set up so quickly that a lot of the guardrails.
Now, obviously, whatever the ethnic group, the actions of a few dozen.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it there, right? It's kind of like a wild way. I just think that a lot of COVID programs were set up. They were set up so quickly that a lot of the guardrails did not get created. So, yeah, that was the excuse. I mean, this kind of sounds the same like Tim Walz.
Dozens of people of East African descent have been charged, convicted, and sentenced for stealing more than $1 billion in taxpayer money from government programs during COVID. As you know, Governor, that is more than Minnesota spends each year to run its Department of Corrections. So I want to give you a chance to respond to this. Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail.
But that attracts criminals. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is the big news. George had to go. He had an emergency, so I wasn't able to finish this video with him, if you guys are wondering. But that is exactly what is going on. Mike Lindell running against a guy who says that, yeah, I mean, yeah, crime just became attractive. Crime has become attractive. So Mike Lindell, does he have a chance? Does he have a chance with a Trump-backed campaign? Can he actually make it happen? You have, of course, Ilhan Omar saying that, hey, you know, it's kind of like I'm taking a look at it, but, you know, it's kind of like it is what it is type of conversation. So all this fraud took place. Did they know about it? Are they responsible? And what exactly? She says also that there is more, that there might be more arrests and more indictments. So, yeah, we shall see, ladies and gentlemen.